Hi guys, welcome to the next video in the GCSE Maths series. Today we're going to be focusing on inverse operations. Now inverse operations are literally just opposite of each other. And every operation in maths has an inverse, but today we're only going to be focusing on addition and subtraction, which are opposites, and multiplication and division, which again are inverse operations. So there's two things I'm going to show you today with inverse operations, and the first is how to check an answer is correct with it. So I've got a calculation here, 5 times 7 equals 35, and I want to know, is that a correct answer or not? Well, I'm going to show you two ways of checking this. So both ways involve doing the inverse of this operation here, this times, this multiply, and the inverse of that is divide. So in both of these occasions we're going to do a division. What we're going to do is start with the answer, so start with 35, and we're going to divide by this number here, 7. Now if our answer is correct, if this 5 times 7 equals 35 is correct, this should be 5. And indeed it is. The second way of doing this, again, we're going to start with the 35. Again, we're going to divide. But this time we're going to divide by this 5. And if our answer is correct, the answer to this part should be 7. And 35 divided by 5 is indeed 7. So we can say pretty safely that 5 times 7 is equal to 35. Now if I flip this piece of paper over, the other thing we can do with inverse operations that I'm going to show you today is solve problems that look like this. So the problem I've got is, I think of a number. I multiply by 2 and then add 4. Then I divide by 5 and subtract 1. And my answer is 1. What was my number? Well, in order to do this, we have to work backwards using inverse operations. So before we do that, let's map out what happens here. I think of a number. We don't know what that is yet, so let's just put a question mark. I multiply by 2, and then I add 4. Then I divide by 5, and finally I subtract 1, and that gets me the answer 1. So that's quite a long series of calculations. But let's work backwards. So let's start with 1. Here we've got minus 1. Let's do the inverse. Let's add 1. So that gets us 2. Here we've got divide by 5. And the inverse of that is times 5. 2 times 5 is 10. Next we've got add 4. The inverse of add 4, subtract 4. 10 subtract 4, 6. Then we've got times 2. The inverse of times is divide. So we need to divide by 2. 6 divided by 2 gets us 3. So our initial number was 3.